Qazi Shah Muzzakker Ahmedul. You were hearing Norman. Some of these things do have a real life impact. Not only so, the Strait of Hormuz. There has been news that is circulating online that states Oman and Iran shall be benefiting from some type of toll scheme that would every ship would have to pay effectively $2 million to pass this strait. That is an exercise by Iran to show their sovereignty over this piece of geometry that belongs to the geography that belongs to them. Asking you regarding how you see this, that is the issue regarding the Strait of Hormuz. That is how US President Donald Trump justifies his attack towards these regions. And the previous negotiating team of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, they've been given the status of persona non grata. That means the Iranian side will not be talking to them in this regard. How are you seeing this? This is, we are in the 41st, if not the 42nd day of the war.
That is very interesting, the point you've raised. Firstly, since it is in close proximity of Oman and Iran, they do what I feel they might be able to justify the fact that they'll be able to charge, because there is a charge for Suez Canal, there's a charge for Panama Canal, and there's but although it's not a canal, but it is within their sovereign territory. However, this will actually change the landscape of the world, and it will change the landscape of how oil is traded, how a big chunk of oil is coming through that strait. So this will definitely have an impact on the freight, and the freight eventually it will also have an impact of the total cost of the parcels that many countries that buy from those countries that goes through the strait. So we definitely it will be a big cost to every nation, and it will be a huge impact on globally. It will be a huge impact if there's a cost to many nations that depends on it. So therefore, it doesn't. I think this is out of aggression that is coming out from them, that they want to charge and pressurize rest of the world into pressuring both countries to come to a table to talk and communicate and settle this matter. That is what I feel. Of course, if it does continue, then Iran will come up with a strategy of that sort and make sure that is implemented and everyone is affected. Since they have such advantage, a geographic advantage, for them to do anything like this, although it might sound very silly, but anything like this is quite highly possible. Yes, both the world and Iran and everyone else, even United States, for example, here in this case, has been affected, due to this war, I think to really reach an amicable settlement, I think there has to be sacrifices made from both sides. So Iran in its side has to make some sacrifices, and the US on that side has to make some sacrifices, because it's the world and people around the world is at their livelihoods is at stake. Every countries like countries in this region, in this region and elsewhere in the world, in Africa and the least developed countries are the most affected out of as an outcome of this war. Right. And for the sake of the world and for the sake of the economy of the world and sake of all these countries, even sake of the Middle East, they have some of the biggest oil producers are there, some of the biggest some of the richest and the richest countries are there, and a lot of ASEAN and South Asian countries are heavily dependent on these sort of So in order to protect, also there's a lot of European and North American investment in Middle East, right? So in order to protect all of this, in order to protect the Middle East, countries like Qatar, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi, at the same time, in order to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz is not affected, for the sake of the global trade and for the sake of the oil and gas, which in return affects everyone. I personally feel, whatever it is, both sides has to make some sacrifices, have to come to an amicable settlement. And what was very interesting is Pakistan taking the role,
Correct. They don't usually come to the front line for taking such a role, no. And they have proved otherwise this time around.
And what was interesting, initially the peace talks were initially started in Oman, and it was mediated by Oman. And now that Pakistan came into the play, And Pakistan is a nuclear power. It's one of the it's a strong military as it is considered, and them mediating such talks. I think I don't know how well they are in terms of foreign diplomacy, in terms of coming to a place where they'll be able to draw some, get them on board, and make both party mediating this and helping this both party come to an agreement. I don't know how successful they will be in terms of that, because as they haven't been in the forefront for quite some time, and we don't have any real case to comment on that. But becoming a military power and South Asian country for the first time and is mediating, it's quite interesting. And I think if they can get other countries on board with them to support them in terms of mediation, I think a good point will reach. And not only that, US and Pakistan also had strategic alliances. On top
Correct.
of that, Iran and Pakistan shares borders. So this is quite an interesting thing. I do not have any case or any evidence of the past or any piece of history to support what I feel or what I'm trying to say.
Right.
But I feel I'm just waiting to see what happens. We want to see what's the outcome. Maybe give it about 2-3 days and see what happens. Today would be a very crucial day.
No, there was a moment just in a day or so we thought that entire region would be nuked to the ground or sent to the Stone Ages. These are comments
Right.
that Donald Trump made. So
Absolutely.